I still remember the sound before I remember the words. It wasn't screaming. It wasn't splashing. It was the sharp rip of Velcro as a woman in oversized white sunglasses reached down and yanked the bright orange life jacket right off my 6-year-old son's shoulders like she was pulling a sweater off a shopping rack. My boy froze, his little hands still reaching for the straps, completely confused, while she looked him dead in the eyes and said, "My son needs this more than you do." For just a second, the entire pool deck went quiet, and I had that familiar feeling I've had more times than I'd like to admit. The one where you know someone has already decided exactly who you are before you've even opened your mouth. My name is Marcus Hale, and I've worked around water for most of my adult life. That Saturday, though, I wasn't thinking about work. I was just a dad trying to spend a few peaceful hours with my son, Caleb, before another crazy week started. Maple Ridge Community Pool had always been our favorite place during the summer. Caleb loved the shallow end because he was finally getting brave enough to leave the steps without clinging to me every second. And every Saturday we'd stop for pancakes afterward, making a whole tradition out of it. I'd checked him into the youth swim program, grabbed one of the loaner flotation vests that matched his weight class, helped him tighten the straps, then told him, "Remember, buddy, confidence first, but never forget to respect the water." He grinned, nodded like he understood every word, then took off chasing a couple of kids with foam noodles. I smiled because that's what every parent lives for, those little moments where nothing feels complicated. Then she showed up. She walked across the deck like she owned the entire facility. Expensive sandals clicking against the concrete, designer handbag hanging from one shoulder, sunglasses bigger than her face. Her son looked a little older than Caleb, maybe 8 or 9. And honestly, he seemed like a perfectly normal kid. He wasn't causing trouble. He wasn't crying. He was just following his mother while carrying a towel almost as big as he was. She stopped the second she noticed Caleb wearing the orange vest. I watched her eyes lock onto it the way someone spots the last item on a clearance shelf. She never asked a lifeguard where she could get one. She never walked to the equipment station. She simply marched over, crouched down, and pulled it right off my kid. Caleb stumbled backward, looking at me instead of her, because children always look toward the person they trust when the world suddenly stops making sense. "Dad," he whispered. I walked over without raising my voice. Years ago, I learned that angry people often expect you to yell because it gives them permission to yell louder. Staying calm unsettles them far more. "Ma'am," I said, "that vest is assigned to my son through the pool's loaner program. There are more available if you ask at the equipment desk." She barely looked at me. "My son needs this one." "Actually," I replied, "he doesn't. That vest is rated for around 40 pounds. Your son appears quite a bit bigger. It's not safe for him." She finally turned toward me, slowly lowering her sunglasses just enough to look over the top. "Are you a doctor?" she asked with a little laugh. A couple of parents nearby chuckled awkwardly, not because it was funny, but because people often don't know what to do when someone decides to be publicly rude. "No," I answered, keeping my tone steady. "I'm just telling you how flotation equipment works." She smirked. "Or maybe you just enjoy telling people what to do." I could feel Caleb quietly slipping behind my leg. He wasn't scared of the water anymore. He was scared of adults acting like this. That's the part people don't think about. Kids remember these moments long after everyone else forgets them. I knelt beside him, squeezed his shoulder, and whispered, "You're okay, buddy." Then I stood back up. "Please give him the vest back." Instead of listening, she called her son over. "Ethan, come here." The boy walked over looking embarrassed before she shoved the vest onto him, struggling with the straps because they barely reached around his chest. The fit was completely wrong. The flotation panel rode high behind his neck before he'd even stepped into the water. I tried one last time. "Please don't put him in the pool wearing that. If he jumps into the deep end, the vest can ride up over his face. That's exactly why they're sized by weight." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "You really love hearing yourself talk, don't you?" Then she leaned toward me just enough so only I could hear. "People like you are always looking for attention." I didn't answer. There are insults you respond to and insults you simply let reveal the person saying them. She grabbed her son's hand and started walking toward the deeper side of the pool anyway. I watched every step, my stomach tightening in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't anger anymore. It was instinct. The same instinct that tells you a thunderstorm is coming before you hear the first crack of thunder. Across the deck, a woman with a clipboard looked up from her inspection paperwork. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the exchange from about 30 feet away. and I recognized that look immediately. She hadn't heard the conversation yet, but she'd seen enough body language to know something wasn't right. She started walking toward us, calm but purposeful, while the boy in the oversized vest took another step toward the deep water, completely unaware that the next 60 seconds were about to change every single person standing around that pool. She stopped about 10 feet away from us, still holding her clipboard against her hip, and before she could even ask a question, the woman in the sunglasses pointed straight at me. "This man has been harassing my family," she announced loudly enough for half the pool to hear. "I'd like him removed before he scares my son." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the story had flipped so completely in less than a minute that it felt surreal. The woman with the clipboard never looked at her. Not once. She kept her eyes on me and said calmly, "Marcus." "Status?" The sunglasses came off so fast you'd think she'd misheard. "Wait, you know him?" she asked. I nodded once. Loner flotation vest removed from another child. Incorrect size placed on hers. Child entering deep water with improperly fitted equipment. The clipboard woman, whose name was Rachel Whitfield, director of aquatic operations for the county, didn't even blink. She wrote one sentence on her inspection form before asking, "Has the equipment been recovered?" "Negative," I answered. "She's refusing." The woman threw both hands in the air. "Why are you talking like he's one of your employees?" Rachel finally looked at her and answered with the most matter-of-fact tone I've ever heard. "Because he is." There wasn't a dramatic pause. There didn't need to be one. You could almost hear the air leave the woman's lungs. "Marcus Hale is this facility's head lifeguard. He's been running emergency water rescue operations here for over 13 years. Before she could respond, 3 sharp whistle blasts exploded across the pool deck. Every lifeguard on duty instantly snapped toward the deep end. Training does that. 3 blasts never mean maybe. They mean move now. I turned before my brain consciously processed what I'd heard, and my stomach dropped. Ethan had already wandered farther into the deep water than anyone realized. The oversized vest had done exactly what I warned it would do. Instead of keeping his face above water, it had floated upward around his ears while the weight of his body slipped downward beneath it. His mouth disappeared under the surface. His arms were flailing, but not in the exaggerated way people imagine from television. Real drowning is painfully quiet. He wasn't screaming. He couldn't. The first scream came from his mother. "Ethan," she yelled, dropping everything she was carrying. By the time her voice reached me, my feet were already moving. There wasn't a decision to make. People sometimes ask whether I ever think before diving into a rescue. The answer is no. Thinking happens during training. Action happens afterward. My body had repeated those movements thousands of times. 3 running strides. 1 flat racing dive. Enter clean to preserve visibility. Eyes open immediately. Find the victim. Reach before panic spreads underwater. Everything slowed down and sped up at exactly the same time. I saw sunlight cutting through the water in bright blue streaks. I saw Ethan's fingers clawing instinctively toward the surface while the vest kept sliding higher over his face. I reached him within seconds, slipped one arm across his chest, rotated his body, and kicked hard toward the surface. The crowd disappeared from my hearing. Water has a strange way of silencing everything except your own breathing. We broke the surface together, and I heard the whistles again as backup guards cleared the pool exactly the way we'd practiced every spring before opening day. 2 guards secured the ladder while another rolled the emergency oxygen bag across the deck. I lifted Ethan onto the concrete, immediately checked his airway, tilted his head, and gave 2 rescue breaths. 1 second. Nothing. Second breath. A cough. Then another. Water sprayed from his mouth before he started crying. I've never been happier to hear a child cry. It means air has returned where silence almost won. Behind me, I heard his mother sobbing uncontrollably. "Oh my God. Ethan! Ethan!" She tried to rush toward him, but another guard gently held her back long enough for us to finish the primary assessment. Pulse steady. Breathing spontaneous. Responsive. Color returning. Rachel knelt beside me. Status? Airway clear. Conscious. EMS evaluation still recommended. She nodded once into her radio. Medic response remains active. Only then did I finally look at the woman who had spent the last several minutes insulting me. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't defensive. She looked completely shattered. Her mascara had started running from crying. Her expensive sunglasses were lying cracked beside one of the lounge chairs where she dropped them. She whispered. "I didn't know. I honestly don't remember what expression I had. I wasn't interested in proving a point. I wasn't waiting for an apology. My attention shifted immediately toward Caleb, who had been standing with another lifeguard ever since I'd entered the water. He still wore that confused expression children get when adults suddenly stop acting predictable. I walked over, crouched beside him, picked up another properly fitted orange vest from the equipment station, and carefully fastened every buckle. "See?" I smiled softly. "Now this one fits exactly the way it's supposed to." He wrapped both little arms around my neck without saying anything. Sometimes kids don't have the words adults expect. They just hug you tighter. Behind us, the paramedics arrived, quickly checking Ethan while reassuring his mother that he appeared stable but should still be transported for observation. Rachel stood nearby speaking with pool management before finally turning toward the growing crowd that had witnessed everything. For anyone who didn't see the entire incident, she announced clearly, the child was wearing improperly sized flotation equipment after it was removed from another participant enrolled in our youth safety program. Mr. Hale attempted multiple times to prevent exactly what occurred. His actions today almost certainly prevented a fatal drowning. The silence afterward felt heavier than any applause could have. A father standing near the diving boards shook my hand without saying a word. Another mother quietly walked over and returned Caleb's towel, which had fallen during all the commotion. One older gentleman simply tipped his baseball cap toward me. Small gestures, ordinary gestures. Somehow they meant more than speeches ever could. The woman eventually walked over, stopping several feet away as though she wasn't sure she deserved to come any closer. "Mr. Kane Hale," she began, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry." I looked at her for a long second before answering. "I'm glad your son is alive." That was all I said, because honestly, anything else would have been about me instead of the child who had nearly paid for an adult's pride. As the ambulance doors closed and pulled away, Rachel quietly handed me a bottle of water. "You okay?" she asked. I took a slow drink before answering. "I'll be fine tomorrow." She smiled because she knew exactly what I meant. Adrenaline has a funny way of hiding everything until the next day. The sore muscles, the shaking hands, the emotional weight. But before either of us could leave the deck, 2 Maple County police officers stepped through the entrance carrying notepads. Rachel looked at me, then toward the security office where dozens of high-definition cameras had recorded every second of what happened. "Looks like," she said quietly, "today isn't over yet." By Monday morning, the story had already traveled farther than I ever expected. I wasn't trying to become the center of attention. But that's the strange thing about moments like that. You don't get to decide which stories people repeat. I pulled into the recreation center expecting another ordinary shift, figuring I'd complete the incident report, answer a few questions, and get back to checking chlorine levels and reminding teenagers not to run on wet concrete. Instead, Rachel was already waiting outside my office with 2 county administrators and a police detective I'd never met before. "Morning, Marcus," she said with the kind of smile that told me she'd already had a very long day. "Looks like you're famous." I laughed under my breath. I'd rather be invisible. Too late for that. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing every camera angle from the facility. The footage showed everything in crystal clear detail. It showed Caleb standing patiently while I adjusted his life jacket. It showed the woman walking over without permission, pulling the vest away, ignoring every warning I gave her, and then placing the oversized flotation device on Ethan. It showed Rachel arriving, my verbal safety report, the 3 emergency whistle blasts, and finally the rescue itself. Watching it from a camera instead of living it felt almost unreal. I remembered everything happening so quickly, yet the recording revealed dozens of little details I'd missed. Caleb instinctively stepping backward when the vest was taken away, another parent pointing toward the equipment station where identical loaner vests were available, one teenage lifeguard already reaching for the rescue tube before I even entered the water. Training really is contagious. One prepared person encourages everyone else to become prepared too. The detective finally closed his notebook. "Based on the video," he said, "it's obvious Mr. Hale attempted multiple times to prevent the incident. We appreciate everyone's cooperation." He never raised his voice or acted dramatic. He simply stated the facts, because facts are usually powerful enough on their own. The investigation eventually led to a child endangerment review. I won't pretend to know everything that happened after that because some matters involved the juvenile. But I do know the county suspended the woman's recreation membership while the case was being evaluated, and she was ordered to complete a water safety education program before she could return with her family. Honestly, I thought that was appropriate. Punishment alone rarely changes people. Education sometimes does. A week later, I was invited to attend a county aquatic safety meeting I'd assumed would be like every other committee gathering I'd ever sat through. Coffee that was too hot, stale donuts, and discussions about maintenance budgets. Instead, the county commissioner stood up, thanked me publicly for maintaining professional standards under extreme pressure, and announced that I was being appointed to the Regional Aquatic Safety Advisory Board, where I'd help review training procedures for public pools across 3 counties. That recognition meant far more to me than any newspaper headline ever could, because it wasn't about one rescue. It was about helping prevent the next one. A few days after everything settled down, Caleb and I went back to the same pool. Some friends asked why. Wouldn't that place remind you of what happened? Maybe, but I didn't want my son learning to avoid places where difficult memories happened. I wanted him to learn that courage isn't pretending bad things never occur. Courage is returning anyway. A little wiser than before, we walked through the same front gate, checked in at the same counter, borrowed another correctly sized orange life jacket, and this time Caleb looked up at me with a smile before tightening the buckles himself. I remembered, he said proudly. Snug, but not too tight. I smiled back. Perfect. We spent the next hour laughing, racing across the shallow end, and practicing floating on our backs under a bright blue summer sky that looked exactly like it had the week before. The water hadn't changed. The pool hadn't changed. Only the people had. Sometimes I still think about Ethan. I hope he grows up remembering the lesson without carrying the fear. None of what happened was his fault. Kids should never have to pay for adult pride. And every now and then, I think about his mother, too. People have asked me whether I accepted her apology. The truth is, I never really answered that question because it wasn't the important one. The important question was whether I hesitated when her son needed help. I didn't. Not because she deserved kindness in that moment, but because her child deserved life. That's the responsibility you accept the day you put on a lifeguard uniform. You don't choose who is worthy of saving. You simply save them. Looking back now, I don't remember the insults nearly as clearly as I remember hearing a little boy cough and start breathing again. If I could erase every harsh word she said in exchange for hearing that sound one more time, I'd make that trade every single day of my life. So now I'd like to ask you something. If someone had publicly humiliated you, insulted your family, and treated your child with complete disrespect, would you have reacted exactly the way I did when their child suddenly needed your help? Or do you think most people would have hesitated, even for just a second? There isn't necessarily one perfect answer, and that's what makes conversations like this so interesting. Share your honest thoughts in the comments because I'd genuinely like to hear where you stand. If this story made you think, moved you, or reminded you that real character is revealed in the hardest moments, please like the video, subscribe for more true-to-life stories about courage, justice, and ordinary people facing extraordinary situations, and I'll see you in the next one.